Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Welcome to another special edition of the Film Exiles podcast. My name is Lupe. Today we have a roundtable discussion of our favorite directors. We thought that this would be like a really good opportunity for you guys to get to know us, to get to know our tastes, and also for us to share some knowledge. I'm happy to be joined by my luminary crew, Adrian.
Hi, Lupe. Hi, guys.
Hey, Manu.
How's everybody doing?
We're doing good. What's up?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
And finally, we have the supervillain himself, the Toxic Doctor.
Hello there.
When did he reach supervillain status?
Hey, yo, when you closed your eyes and slept, it happened. You gotta sleep with one eye open. All right. So before we get into the main, let's start with basics. What is a film director? Adrian, how would you describe a film director?
Okay, well, I would describe a film director as sort of a conductor of an orchestra, where he or she brings together all the elements and all the talents into one unifying piece.
That is perfect. Chris, could you give us like some historical context and a little bit of background on how the role of the director has evolved in Hollywood over the years?
Wow, so yeah, back in the olden days, old Hollywood, you had directors that were more of a hired hand. They would be brought on by producers and studios who were the real, the ones who really ran the show here in Hollywood back then. Then you kind of go through to the more modern era, like when I was growing up, you always had film stars, right? You had, for example, Tom Cruise, you had Leonardo DiCaprio, you had Brad Pitt, Robert De Niro, even going back further, Mel Gibson. The draw was the actor. But today, I think the era of the movie star has largely waned. It's not completely expired because you have the likes of The Rock, and you still have Tom Cruise running around doing crazy shit. But really the draw of a film now is to what director's name is attached to a film. So now you will see, you have a Christopher Nolan film, or you have a Zack Snyder film, or you'll see a Scorsese film. Like, when you see a name like that attached to a film, you're more likely to go rather than a particular actor. So I would say that has been the evolution kind of a director. They went from being hired hands to the star of the show.
That's absolutely true. And that's why this discussion is very relevant and I think is very interesting. Now, before we talk about going to our favorite directors, we have to talk about the types of directors. Now, there are generally two types of directors. There is the general director, and then there is the auteur director. So the auteur director is a special kind of director. They are distinguished by having an authorial imprint on all the aspects of the film. So a film directed by an auteur will show an artistic signature that differentiates them from other filmmakers. A recognizable style, themes, and motifs that recur throughout their entire portfolio of films. Auteur, the term is usually associated with prestige filmmakers, but in reality, it's not exclusively that. Even blockbuster directors can be auteur filmmakers. Manu, could you give us some examples of auteur filmmakers, and be sure to include some blockbuster filmmakers as well?
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up that point about author filmmakers always seeming to think that they're prestige films, but like you said, a lot of them are blockbuster directors. I think that the best example is Michael Bay. I think that he is really underrated as a director. A lot of people see him as just somebody who just blows things up, and it's true. Michael Bay blows things up, but he brings his own style and signature to it. Like when you see a Michael Bay explosion, you know it's a Michael Bay explosion.
True.
And his style goes beyond that. It's the way that he moves the camera. It's the way that is the heroic posture that he puts his actors in. It's he has this famous coined term, a bayhem, which is when the camera freezes and we kind of pan around in a 360 degrees and seeing all of the destruction and everything that's going on. And I think that that takes mastery of one's style and one's own filmmaking sensibilities to be able to pull that off and to make it so easily recognizable from movie to movie to movie. So when you see a Michael Bay movie, you know you're watching a Michael Bay movie. And there's other directors that have the same touch. You have people like Quentin Tarantino. You always know that you're going to be getting very quick, witty, smart dialogue all the time, along with his over-the-top, excessive, even at times excessive violence. You have people like Nicholas Winding Refn, Woody Allen, Wes Anderson, who is very methodical. He's very slow in his storytelling. He takes the time to fully show the character. Slowly as the movie goes by, you don't get everything about the character right away. That comes as the movie comes. The further the movie goes along, Francis Ford Coppola, Terrence Malick, and Darren Aronofsky is also a director that has the title of auteur given to him, because when you're watching an Aronofsky film, when you're watching The Black Swan with Natalie Portman, or when you're watching Mother that came out a couple of years ago with Jennifer Lawrence, you're watching an Aronofsky. So their style is unmistakable.
Yeah, well, I mean that's very well said. I think the main thing to remember about auteur directors is just that it's a director that has a particular style, a recognizable style. I think that's the simplest way to put it. And you have, explained that really well. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get into the main event.
It's the main event of the evening.
Ding, ding, ding. So we are going to go in roundtable fashion, turn by turn, picking our favorite directors. Now, if a particular director has been picked, they're off the board and you cannot pick them. You must pick another director. So I encourage you guys to tell us why you like these directors and give us some examples of films that they've directed that you like. And even you could go as far as telling us their impact on the film industry in general, or any directors that influence them. Go as deep as you want to, go as light as you want to. So we are going to start with Chris. Chris, take the floor.
Sorry, guys, I've taken the best one.
Oh, no.
Christopher Nolan, my favorite director. He is the director that made me fall in love with film.
Okay.
With Inception. However, going through his previous filmography, since then, I failed to find a single film that he has not created expertly. Even going to his first feature, which is Memento, I mean, for someone to come out with that as their first film, I think is truly stunning. One of the particular traits of Nolan that I admire and I really love is how he plays with time. So discounting his Batman trilogy, almost all of his films play with time. So you have Memento, which provides a kind of a forward and a backward story running concurrently, merging at the center, and then he uses color and black and white for the different kind of time periods. But he also uses, so for example, in Insomnia, he kind of plays with a lack of sleep and how that affects the perception of time. And then you've got Inception, of course, where time is stretched as you go deeper and deeper into the dream. Interstellar, so you play with the space-time continuum, going to supermassive planets. And then you have Dunkirk, his latest film, where he gives us 3 stories running in parallel. However, one is a short story, one is a medium-length story, and one is a very long story, and they all meet at the culmination. So I think the way that's the thing that I love most about him. I'm actually my first love as a child growing up was science, specifically physics, and I love time. My favorite superhero, for example, is the Flash, and how he plays with time in the Speed Force. So there was always that personal attraction to time, and Christopher Nolan got that for me. Okay. So that's why he's my favorite.
All right. So Christopher Nolan is off the board. Manu, the ball is in your court. You can't mention Christopher Nolan, although I think that you were going to.
I actually was not. I knew that. Really? I knew that.
I have pants on fire.
I mean, he would have been, but I knew that somebody else was going to use him, so I just didn't bother. I came prepared. I came prepared because I know my fellow exiles. I am going to bring up David Fincher. David Fincher is a beast. There's very few words to probably describe how amazing that man is. I think that if you look at his filmography from Seven, Gone Girl, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Zodiac, The Social Network. He's so great at telling very human stories in the midst of insane situations. In Seven, you get to see the darkness of the human mind and the human spirit, and that's something that's a theme that keeps popping up in all of his films. Even in Gone Girl, you can see just how bad people can be when they're pushed against the wall. My favorite film from him is The Social Network that I've actually watched 3 times last week. I watched it because it was his birthday, and I watched it one time. And I haven't seen this movie at least almost 6 or 7 times before, but I just caught on to things that I had never seen before, and that made me want to revisit the movie even deeper. And I think that when a filmmaker is capable of doing that even time and time again after you've seen this film, you can keep going back to that well and picking up other details that enhance the story, or it can be like small character moments, like Andrew Garfield's character walking into the apartment and picking up 2 beers, and meanwhile Eisenberg comes and just takes one for himself, and in that moment you're given a quick snapshot of that relationship, of how those two communicate and what kind of people they are, simply in that moment. And Fincher is so good at doing that. Also, whenever he shows you a room, he makes sure that you can see the entire room, and there's so much detail about who the characters are, what's important to them, and what their motivations are, that it's hard for you not to like move your eye all over the screen to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And I think that directors like that reward the audience for paying attention to detail and for keep coming back and watching their films over and over again.
That's an excellent one. I love David Fincher. If you didn't pick David Fincher, he's one that was definitely going to be on my list. I think he's really a special director because although he is an auteur director, he has made different types of movies. So he's really well known for his noir films, for psychological thrillers, but he's also done, like you said, The Social Network. He also did Benjamin Button, and that's like a sweeping sort of epic romantic tale. Like that's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. So David Fincher is a really good one that you brought up. So Adrian, you can't pick Christopher Nolan. You cannot pick David Fincher. The ball is in your court. Who are you going to pick?
Okay, well, no surprise, I'm going to pick Zack Snyder.
Yay!
And I'm gonna say Zack Snyder because it was actually Zack Snyder and Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. They even got me really caring or paying attention to what a director was doing with a film. And I mean, depending on what moment you get me, whether you want to argue whether Man of Steel is more of a masterpiece than Batman v Superman, I will agree with you both times. So I'm going to set all of that aside because I absolutely love that. And maybe we've gone over and over that a lot. So I wanted to talk about 300. I actually didn't see 300 until after I saw BVS. And I had thought, like, when it was advertised, I just thought it was like just another Hollywood film, like war film, and maybe it was like bloody and kind of gory, and I wouldn't really be that interested in it. I just sort of thought it'd be like a face value kind of thing. Well, boy, was I wrong. When I saw it, I mean, like, you're just in awe, and you're just like, you know, what am I even watching? And I just remember being so gripped. It's like you get into the film and then you don't realize that you're watching a film until it's over, and then you sort of come out of it. So I know that he gets criticized. We're talking about auteurs have a certain style, but the style that Zach had with the lighting and the slow-mo and all of that, I thought it gave weight to the life and death sacrifice that these men were giving, you know, weight and depth and drama, emotion. Like, as you're watching it, I think it lets you feel all of that emotion. So it's not just like style for its own sake. I hate it when anybody says that. So I'll leave it at that.
Amazing. Yeah. Wow. Those are 3 directors that actually were on my list. If you guys hadn't mentioned either one of those, I would have picked it. You see, this is why it's bad to be a gentleman and be like, all right, you guys go ahead and I'll go last. Next time I'm going to go first. That's what I'm going to do. All right. But with that being said, the director that I'm gonna put forward is Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie, yes. Now, Guy Ritchie is he is the poster boy, the epitome, the definition of an auteur director. Now, you will have to forgive him for Aladdin, which was basically
some of us liked Aladdin, bro.
I'm not saying Aladdin is good or not. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. What I'm saying is that the Aladdin live action movie is not a signature Guy Ritchie movie.
Right.
It's not a movie that's in his style and in his image. Now, if you want to talk about movies that really express who Guy Ritchie is, obviously, Snatch is like classic. Obviously, you got Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. You got to think of his spy movie, The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Yes.
That's amazing. And you really surprised me with King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. That was actually the film that really like boosted him to like my favorite like directors. I'm a huge fan of mythologies. I'm a huge fan of fantasy. I'm a huge fan of epic filmmaking. And with that film, Guy Ritchie was able to take his signature style, which has a lot to do with sort of like, he has this snappy dialogue, quick cuts, very fluid action, dynamic camera movements,
title sequences are always amazing.
Montages. Like, he is so good at that stuff. And every film he makes it like, apart from just the interesting story you go through, the dynamic way in which he edits and his dialogue, moves along is just like really interesting to see. It has a rhythm to it, even like his Sherlock Holmes film. So I'd say like a really good term to use is he's a very rhythmic kind of filmmaker, very dynamic and rhythmic. And he's one of my favorite filmmakers. Anything that he's going to make, I am there for it. So far we have Christopher Nolan from Chris. We have David Fincher from Manu. We have Zack Snyder from Adrian. And we have Guy Ritchie from me. So let's go back to Chris. Chris, you have the first pick in the second round. Who is your director?
Well, my second pick has been taken, and it would have been Zack Snyder. So my third pick, and probably one of the best directors and most underrated directors, Clint Eastwood. I think, for me, Clint Eastwood has always been in my top 5 directors. And as the years pass, he gets higher and higher on that list. So one of the things that really attracted me to Clint Eastwood's style of directing is how he manages to make the small feel grand and how he makes the grand feel intimate. And he always walks a tightrope. So, for example, we can talk about Invictus or even the $1 Million Baby. Both of these surround sport and huge events like a boxing world title fight or a World Cup rugby final. These are huge events, but he makes them feel so intimate. The same can be said for The Mule, which came out last year. It's such a small story. It's about an old man running drugs because he's running out of money and he wants to save his house. But then he looks into greed and into, how this old man with nothing became super greedy. He didn't know when to stop. So it's just a very small story, but the way he makes it feel so big is incredible. I was watching $1 Million Baby again last night, and what impressed me is that he actually did the score for that.
Really?
And again, and the score for that is so simple but beautiful, and you can listen to that piano play, and it does what his films do. It's such a very simple melody, but when you close your eyes and listen to it, it makes you travel, and it makes you think of the possibilities and what you can achieve. And that's what his films do. It makes the small big and the big small. And he's just a wonderful director. One thing he doesn't really do is write his own films. He picks very good scripts. So a lot of people say the best directors are usually writer-directors. I think Clint Eastwood is an exception to that rule. I think he's one of the best directors we will ever see.
All right, that's a good one. Okay. Clint Eastwood, definitely a legend in Hollywood. He's one of the directors that has a first look deal, which is basically like an exclusivity contract, and he has one with Warner Brothers, and you don't get one of those if you're a regular director, and he's had that for ages, and Warner Brothers will never ever let him go, and that's one of the most prestigious.
You can go through his filmography going all the way back to even Mystic River in the early 2000s. That's when I think he took off. Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, and then guy's unstoppable.
All right. So next up, Manu, with your second pick in the second round, what director are you going to pick?
In the late 80s and early 90s, there was a run of African American films like Juice, films like Boys in the Hood, films that depicted a certain type of the reality of the African American experience in America. And then later on in the 90s, we got a shift. We saw more movies that brought African Americans in a more positive light. Films like Love Jones, films like Love and Basketball. Those films kind of showed that African Americans lived lives and loved and had hopes and dreams like everybody else in America did. And one of the directors that was part of this shift was Rick Famuyiwa. He was actually born in Nigeria. Actually, no, I don't think he was born in Nigeria. I think he's originally from Nigeria, but he grew up in Compton. And his first film was The Woods, starring Mike Epps, Taye Diggs. And I saw that film the year that it came out, and it struck such a chord with me because so many of the things that Mike was facing in that movie, Mike is the lead in that film, really felt like a lot of things that I was dealing with. You know, I was always moving around, and I was always trying to have to make new friends and start over at new schools. And Rick went through the same thing as well, and he depicted that so well in this movie, along with introducing us to like these great characters that were so interesting and lived this life that was so different from mine, but I felt like I could still relate to them. And that's what he's so good at. It's making you relate to these people in an environment that you know nothing about. Taking you to Compton in the late '80s, where there's the gang war between the Crips and the Bloods, but in the middle of it is just a kid that's trying to go to a school dance. It's a kid that's trying to lose his virginity. It's a kid that's trying to get to college, that's trying to get a job, that's trying to get married, and the fact that he's capable of doing that is I think is a remarkable quality for a director. A couple of years ago, he came out with Dope, which was about
Yeah, that's a
this
good one.
Dope, which is I think such a great step up from the Wood that came out in '98, but it still held those same themes of growing up in this hard place and still trying to be a normal person. And Dope is such a great story, and it's so beautifully directed and acted, and it's so funny and charming. And I think that he really has a good grasp of character and of the importance of showing that, you know, we're all people, you know, that we all want the same things, that we all have the same desires regardless of where we come from, or who we are. One thing that I love is that in the Wood there's an auxiliary character named Stacy, who is a gangbanger who works for he's a gangbanger, I think he's a Blood. And we get to see him again in Dope, the same
Oh, you
character
better
played by
got
the
that
same
right.
actor, and now he is a security guard at the school
At
where.
the school.
So, and I just thought that that was such a beautiful, wonderful touch, and that, you know, it's Rick Famuyiwa, a connected universe that we get. So,
Yeah.
and I just really love this director, and I really hope that, you know, he gets to bust out on the blockbuster stage, because he really, really does deserve it.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
He's another. He did also Brown Sugar, which I love, which is such an
Mhm.
underrated love story.
One of my
And,
favorite
and one
films.
thing that he does beautifully as well in all of these movies is the way that he implements hip hop music into these stories. Like, and I think Brown Sugar is such a beautiful example of that. Brown Sugar is the love of this girl that falls in love with this boy at the same time as she's falling in love with hip hop, and her relationship with him kind of mirrors her relationship with hip hop. It's just, and he just does it so flawlessly. Like he's really he's very gifted, and I really hope that, you know, he gets to blow up the way that I think he deserves.
Wow. I think I'm going to change my favorite director to Rick Famuyiwa. Dude, that was such a Are you sure that you're not like on Rick Famuyiwa's like PR staff or something?
Dude, I wish I could be, man. That guy is a beast, man. I'm just like
No, but to keep it real, Rick Famuyiwa is an amazing director. Like, if you haven't seen Dope, go see that movie. A lot of people don't know. It's one of the best coming of age stories in the last decade. I'll probably put it up there as the best. Like, and he's such a crafty filmmaker. He understands film. He understands story. He understands character. He understands the technical aspects of it. Like, I echo every single thing you said. You know, I'm 100% behind it. So, Adrian, the pressure is on you now. We just got like a huge, passionate speech that deserves an 8-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival from Manu. So, with your second pick in the second round, who do you select?
Okay, well, I'll go much lighter, but it's hard to follow, you know, the man who brought Watchmen to screen. So there's quite a gap between my 1 and 2. But I wanted to mention Kenneth Branagh, who directed Cinderella and Murder on the Orient Express. Now, having him have done Shakespeare and been an actor, I see that reflected in his directing, in his, you know, in casting. Like in Cinderella, he got Kate Blanchett to be the stepmother, and he got Johnny Depp in Murder on the Orient Express. I think both movies are beautiful, as far as the set design and costume. So it's like I just want to go wherever they are. And I thought with Cinderella, which could have been done kind of where they made fun of it or whatever, but he just went full fantasy on it. And we're, how do I explain? Like, I think he brought a whimsical element to the story without it being cheesy or sentimental. It wasn't self-aware or anything. And then there were a few things that he did with the camera that I thought were really interesting. Like when it was getting toward midnight and the spell was going to be undone, there's sort of this topsy-turvy thing that he does with the camera, and everything starts going crazy and stuff. So I think that there's a charm and there's drama, and the villains get a chance to shine, just like I think you would see in a Shakespearean play. So I think you see that in those films.
And you didn't even mention Manu's favorite part of Cinderella, which is the 360 degree shot when they're doing the ballroom dance.
And then the dress changing too. Yes,
I'm actually more upset she didn't mention his work in Thor. I think that he did a great job on the first Thor.
I liked it.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point about his theater background, because one thing that's particular about people who work in theater is because it's staged and they don't have the same assets that films do. Sets and set dressing tends to be very elaborate and very crafty, and in every single Kenneth Branagh movie you can see that.
Yes.
In Thor, the set design, the production design, very elaborate, intense craftsmanship, very beautiful. Same thing with Cinderella. Same thing with Murder on the Orient Express. So that's a really, really good one that you've selected there. So my turn. I'm going to go with a director who is very popular, who has gone through ups and downs, but through every single turn in his career, he has always been dear to my heart. M. Night Shyamalan. Yes. M. Night Shyamalan is the director of The Sixth Sense, director of Signs, the director of The Village, the director of Unbreakable, the director of Glass. He's done so many movies, including films like Lady of the Water and The Last Airbender, which people didn't really enjoy. He is definitely an auteur director in that his films that tend to be more successful are films that are made in his particular style. Whenever he's tried to go out and do like sort of like a blockbuster type of movie, it's not gone so well, in my opinion, at least. Obviously, we know him for his twist endings. We know him for his, mystery thriller films. And in case you didn't know, The Sixth Sense is my favorite film of all time. It's tied with The Matrix as my all-time favorite film. And if you just go and listen to his behind-the-scenes commentaries and stuff like that, this is a guy that's very crafty. He knows film inside out. In his films, there's a lot of symbolism, using like colors and objects to run motifs and relay subliminal messages throughout film. He does a lot in terms of structure and tailoring the structure in very creative ways that you may not notice. Unbreakable is a masterpiece, one of the best comic book movies of all time. And I'll never forget when that film first came out, it didn't get the best reviews. The reviews were actually mixed and quite negative, even though a lot of people now will tell you that they like it. When it came out, I remember not really getting into arguments with people, but really, trying to tell people that it's a great film.
I had that film on VHS tape and I watched it so much, I wore it out.
It is an amazing film because if you're a fan of comic book movies, that was like a dream. And one thing I tell people is that even before Christopher Nolan, he was the first person to do a realistic superhero movie. And a lot of people don't give him credit for that, but he was the first person to do if a superhero was in the real world, how would this mythology translate to our real world, even before Christopher Nolan did it. So I'm very, very proud to have him on my list. He's someone who will always be one of my favorite directors, and I can't wait for his next film project.
And he's well known for his twists, and you mentioned that, but I don't think you can overstate how important his twists are in cinema, because like we've come up with phrases like a Hitchcockian kind of finale. Mm-hmm. He has owned the Shyamalan twist. Yeah. Like that is going to be a twist in a film is going to be known as Shyamalan, like in from the future. Now on,
yes, yeah.
Like it is elite level filmmaking what he has done with the twist, and it will be forever associated with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the second round, we had Chris pick
Clint
Eastwood. We had Manu pick Rick Famuyiwa, and Adrian blessed us with Kenneth Branagh, and I picked M. Night Shyamalan. So now we're going to the third and final round. Ladies and gentlemen, keep your gloves above the waist. Play nice, don't play dirty. Protect yourselves at all time, and let's get it on. So we'll start with Chris. Chris, right. Who is your third pick in third round?
I'm torn because I'm shocked nobody else took one of my remaining picks. I won't pick Martin Scorsese, even though he is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Who I will pick is Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone has always been one of my favorite filmmakers, particularly his takes on right-wing America. So his political views align very well with mine. So going back to Platoon, his take on the Vietnam War is very important. Unafraid to tell the harsh and dirty truths of that war. Then you go to The Doors, one of my favorite bands of all time, going through Nixon. And then you have films like Comandante, which is a documentary on Fidel Castro, his attack on Wall Street twice, talking about the greed of capitalism. And then he kind of flips it every now and then with a film like Alexander, which wasn't particularly great in my opinion, but it was him trying something different. But his wheelhouse is definitely political, and we see that today with one of his latest films is Snowden. Again, going against the grain from the American political establishment. So his political views being so aligned with mine has kind of always had that attraction to me as a filmmaker. And then how can we talk about him without mentioning an American football classic, Any Given Sunday? I'm not an American football fan.
Life is a game of inches.
But when I watch that film, I feel like it makes me feel so hyped, that delivery in that particular speech that Manu mentioned, the Inches speech.
Willie Beeman.
It's a wonderful film, and not in his kind of political preachy wheelhouse. And I understand he can get preachy at times, but we don't have enough of that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important. Film is an avenue to discuss all aspects of life, and politics shouldn't be off limits. And he is brave enough to do that, and has been brave enough since the 70s. So no, he has been and always will be one of my favorite directors.
All right, a very controversial and bold pick by Chris. So next up, Manu, this is your final pick of favorite directors. So choose your weapons wisely.
I watch too many movies. Like I am actually like conflicted here, because I have to choose. It's like choosing your children. But I think for my third pick, I would have to go with Denis Villeneuve.
Nice.
Yeah, last year.
Villeneuve. Villeneuve.
I knew Villeneuve from of course Blade Runner 2049 and Prisoners and Arrival. And then when we started the pod last year, Fabrice suggested to me and Mike that we should watch one of his earlier films, Incendie. So Mike and I watched it, and we were like, we need to do a pod about this movie. And it was this amazing, brutal story that spun three generations of a family, and it just shook me to my core. And it has one of the greatest endings that I have seen in a movie in quite some time. And the way that it's all set up and that it all plays together, everything is done by a master craftsman. And I was so impressed with that movie. And this was after seeing his later work. And that weekend I rewatched Incendie, and then I went and I watched his first film, which was Polytechnique, which he's following. It's a true story about a man that took a gun into a school and took the lives of many women. He only killed women, and Villeneuve. The whole movie is in black and white, and we follow this horrible day, and it's such a gut-wrenching movie, but again, it's just done with so much mastery of all of the elements, and that was his first film. And it's incredible to see his evolution, and I cannot wait to see what he does with Dune, which I think is going to just keep pushing the boundaries of what he can do. He's so great at handling camera, and the fact that Blade Runner 2049 is shot on a digital camera is really something that deserves
unbelievable.
It deserves so unbelievable much praise, and I think he has a really good way of choosing his actors and of working with his actors and of really getting the best performance out of them. And I really think that he's not done. He's done I think Prisoners with Jake Gyllenhaal is amazing, and Hugh Jackman is great. I think what's the other one? I think Enemy.
Sicario.
Yes, Sicario. That's another one. I remember when I watched Enemy, me and Lupe started talking about it in our group chat, because it was such a good movie, and that's the thing. He is so great at crafting these films, crafting these experiences, and drawing you into his world and into these characters. He's really, really somebody that I am in awe of what he's capable of doing.
That's an amazing pick, and he's somebody that definitely, I think he's just going to keep on going from strength to strength. I don't think he has never made a bad movie, and I just don't think he ever will. He's the type of filmmaker that I don't even think it's possible for him to make something that's not superlative. So he's somebody that definitely in the future is going to be a legend. It's just a matter of time, to be sincere. So that's an amazing pick. So next up, Adrian, this is your final pick. Choose wisely.
Okay, I had to rack my brain a little bit, but I started to think about The Truman Show. And I looked up at the author's Peter Weir, and he also directed The Dead Poets Society and Mosquito Coast.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Exactly. So I started thinking about, the similarities between these. So you have Jim Carrey in The Truman Show, and
Robin
Williams in The Prep School, and then Harrison Ford in The Mosquito Coast. And all of these men have sort of in different ways, either a touch of madness or a touch of greatness, or they have something else going on, and they go through this just journey or something in the film that their experiences showcase. So I just love those films. And I didn't realize he did a film in 2010 called The Way Back that I actually haven't seen. And I'm glad that we are talking about this, because I'll go look at that film now, because I love the other ones.
Amazing.
Yeah, Truman Show is underrated. I'll always say it. Truman Show is so underrated.
Yeah, I'm not a big, I know sacrilege, but I'm not a very big Jim Carrey fan. But yes, I absolutely
Sacrilege.
Sorry, it is what it is. But I absolutely love him in The Truman Show.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
Yeah. All right. So, final pick. I saved the best for last. My hidden gem, my secret weapon, my final favorite director on my list of 3 is Catherine Bigelow. An absolute beast, a monster behind the camera, a master craftsman. She's notable films that she's directed. My favorites of hers is The Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, Detroit. She also directed Point Break. She's just like so stylish. She's so like, there's some directors that when you see the films that they've made, you just feel like it's someone who's in total command of every aspect of the film. She has a particular style, and this sort of like run and gun behind the subject camera style. It's almost like she's the filmer is a reporter in a war zone kind of thing, and it's not shaky camera, but it's handheld, so it has this very visceral intensity to it. It's very difficult to do because a lot of people try to pull it off and it just comes off looking like, I don't know, some found footage, cheap stuff. But when she does it, it's almost chaotic, but at the same time, it's so controlled. And she is the only director who knows how to do this very well. And she's done it. Obviously, it fits perfectly when you're shooting a war film because it's almost like a war correspondent is filming the action. But then she also employs it in a film that's like in an urban setting. So, for example, in Detroit, she used that as well. And it just gave this sort of tense atmosphere, made it feel like a war was happening in the city and everyone was in danger. And she's absolutely phenomenal. She's a director that I just hope that, we always talk about female directors in filmmaking and how, they're not given their just due or they're not given enough opportunities. She's a director that I can't wait to see her get bigger and bigger, movies, like blockbuster movies. I mean, if she wants to do them.
She is such an incredibly versatile director as well.
She will be so good to do like anything like blockbuster. Like I see a lot of filmmakers who get to make big movies. And I don't want to mention any names because at the Film Exiles, we're not about negativity. We're a very positive group, even though one of us is a supervillain called Toxic Josh. I
was about to say, did you forget who you're like sitting right next to right now?
but in all seriousness, there are a lot of directors, male and female, who get opportunities to make massive, big budget films who cannot even carry her water. Who can't be her assistant? Who can't be her intern? I'm that bullish on Catherine Bigelow.
What about her second unit director?
Yeah.
Let's not pull any punches here. She is the greatest female director of all time.
Yeah. To be like,
I've not seen a more versatile director. Like she goes and does Point Break, and then she goes and does her war films and Detroit, and then she goes and does a film like Strange Days, which is like a kind of futuristic sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah,
I mean,
she's incredible. She's incredible. Absolutely, and she was married to Jim Cameron for a minute.
Yeah,
so that's like that was like the power couple to end all power. One of the greatest, blockbuster filmmakers of all time.
Can't believe we've gone through this pod without mentioning
James Cameron. So. So my final pick is Catherine Bigelow.
Zero Dark 30 is awesome, and Detroit is amazing.
And Detroit is so I was so furious that it was denied Academy and Oscar recognition, and the only reason why it was denied that was for political reasons. Not to get too deep into it.
As all things are in Hollywood.
I was so disappointed because that movie was about my favorite movie of the year.
I was also glad that we got to see John Boyega act. He was so good in that.
Was so good in that. He's not just some comedic goofball type of actor. He can do serious dramatic stuff. And you also have to give Catherine Bigelow credit for casting him having the vision to see he could do that, and then directing and bringing that dramatic performance out of him. She's absolutely incredible. Okay, so to recap so far, Chris, which directors did you select as your favorites?
So my favorite director of all time came in at number one, Chris Nolan. My second favorite was Taken, Zack Snyder. I didn't go with Scorsese. My fourth and fifth favorite directors of all time, Clint Eastwood and Oliver Stone.
Nice. Manu, give us a recap of the directors that you picked.
My first pick was David Fincher. My second pick was Rick Famuyiwa. And my third pick was Denis Villeneuve.
Nice. Adrienne, who did you pick?
My first pick by far and away was Zack Snyder. And after that, Kenneth Branagh and Peter Weir.
Nice. And for me, I picked Guy Ritchie, M. Night Shyamalan, and Catherine Bigelow. So now that we're done with favorite directors, let's get an opportunity to pick a legendary director, someone who's iconic, mythic in status, who may not be our favorite, but we respect so much that we feel like, we need to give them, a bit of our time. Adrienne, would you like to start us off with a legendary director that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. I want to talk about Rob Reiner,
Nice.
who did Stand By Me and Misery and Princess Bride and A Few Good Men.
Masterpiece.
Right? And
When Harry Met Sally.
Yes.
You're all right, Matt. You're all right. We get it. It's your favorite rom-com.
It's not my favorite, but it's such a good... I'm sorry. Go on. Carry on, Adrienne.
Well, that's all right. Like I still absolutely love Princess Bride, quoted all the time. I still remember, being impacted by the wit and the humor and the dialogue and the sword fighting and just all of that. And then A Few Good Men is just a solid drama, solid suspense. So, just hits you. It just was so great. So, Rob Reiner.
Iconic line.
Truth, love, faith.
Truth, love, faith. You can't handle the truth.
Handle the truth.
Yeah.
written by Aaron Sorkin. A Few Good Men was written.
Really?
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin wrote A Few Good Men. It was actually he actually wrote it as a play, and then they turned it into a movie. Amazing. And the director, amazing. That's an incredible pick.
Manu, your turn.
Well, a couple of years ago, there was this movie that was announced that was supposed to come out. I don't think it was ever released, but there was a lot of talk about how it mirrored an old Japanese film by Kurosawa called Seven Samurai. So hearing about this film that I was really looking forward to and that I'm still looking forward to, if anybody knows what happened to this movie, please point me in the right direction. But
could you say release it?
Yeah, that would be great, because I remember there were trailers for this movie. There were posters for this movie. There was actually a poster for this movie that resembled a poster from Seven Samurai, which is the story about a group that is put together to defeat a great evil that is coming to bring all kinds of nastiness upon a population. So I digress. So I went back and I watched Seven Samurai, and I was completely blown by it. It's in black and white, but it didn't bother me at all. It's such a wonderful, beautiful story. The use of shadows is amazing. The characters are really great, and it's incredible to see that, to today you can still go back to this movie and retrofit it to fit our current issues and our current situations. Luckily, even though we didn't get that particular movie, Antoine Fuqua got to do Magnificent Seven with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt, which which basically remade that movie, but as a Western. And I don't know if you guys have seen it, but that movie is fantastic. Fuqua is another director that almost made my list. He's great as well. But I would definitely say Kurosawa is a legendary director. Even though I've only seen Seven Samurai, I've heard so much about him, so much about his work. And now that we've done this, now I am obligated to go back and watch the rest of his films.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, his influence on cinema is immeasurable. Like, I always say, like, if you look at, obviously we know, like, Zack Snyder is heavily influenced by him. So whenever people see Zack Snyder scenes and they see like rain or fire or wind, Kurosawa always said that he never shot action scenes plainly. Like, we see a lot of action scenes these days, and they may be good, but they tend to be boring. Well, something that Kurosawa did was he always had some element surrounding the action just to add more movement, to add more dimension and more depth to it than just, the usual. And it's influenced a lot of films. Even the recent Hobbs and Shaw, the director David Leitch talked about how his action scenes in third act were influenced by Kurosawa's style of shooting action, which he pioneered and introduced to the world. So I'll go ahead and talk about my legend, which would be Sergio Leone. And Sergio Leone is the director of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and A Fistful of Dollars. That trilogy of The Lone Rider movie starring Clint Eastwood as this mythical, almost supernatural Western badass cowboy. It came at a time in which the Western genre was dying out, and give you one last jolt of life.
One final hurrah.
One final hurrah. And these are masterpieces. They're classics. The way he combines score with action, with cinematography and storytelling and quirky humor, but really intense and visceral danger in a very stylish way, was something that had never been seen before. And it's something that if you go and revisit today, is just as captivating as the day that, our parents, saw those films and were so captivated by them. Like a lot of films that we see today, when you see the way they blend in, like, music, those sort of like iconic sweeping scores, the way they frame heroes, in that sort of heroic posing with guns and that sort of stuff. Like, a lot of that comes from his films, and he was the one that made Clint Eastwood become a legend.
I was just going to say, I wouldn't have one of my favorite directors if not for
Sergio Leone's influence. And he just made, his heroes so badass and so cool. And Clint Eastwood was able to carry that into, like, his Dirty Harry films and carry that forward. And we see that influence trickle down to our modern day heroes. That's even how you got people like Arnold Schwarzenegger was an 80s interpretation of the Dirty Harry character, the badass cool guy who would take on like all the enemies in the world and still be okay. So Sergio Leone is a director that I'd like, people to pay attention to. If you haven't seen the films that I mentioned, please go check them out. Trust me, like, you will not be disappointed at all. Chris, would you like to talk about a legend in filmmaking?
Yes, there can only be one for me, and it's Ridley Scott. The guy has made so many films, but not just of any old quality. He has made so many films of the highest standard. He's been making top quality movies since the 70s, right? So Alien is the first one that, his first big blockbuster that comes to mind. So that was in 79. Then after, in the 80s, just a couple of years later, in 82, you get Blade Runner. And then and then you go forward and you've got classics like Thelma and Louise. And then you go even more forward into another decade and you've got Gladiator with Russell Crowe and Hannibal. So you go from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and you're getting classic films from him. Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut, is a masterpiece, like a truly incredible, epic adventure set in the past, which is, again, something that he's really good with, and he's done with Robin Hood, and as I mentioned earlier, Gladiator, G.I. Jane, American Gangster, like Prometheus. The guy is just a monster.
His body of work is unrivaled.
Just go through his filmography, and
it doesn't even look real.
It's just, you can't imagine that one man has done all of this work. And even The Martian is one of my favorite films of the last few years. And then you think, okay, this man has been working over the course of 4 decades. He's got 51 director's credits. That means he's been making films like every couple of years. Every year he's churning. Every year he's churning a film out, and you know how taxing, emotionally, physically it is to make one film of a high caliber blockbuster film. Like most directors make one, and we're talking about high level directors here. Most high level directors make one film every 3 years. It takes 2 years to make, from pre-production through to post-production.
That's a very fast turnaround.
And that's
2 years.
2 years of fast turnaround. Most people make in 3 years. This guy is churning them out. And the names we've mentioned, they're not like fluff pieces. These are monster movies. And he's churning them out every year, almost every year. This guy, I just have nothing but respect for him.
Agreed.
Maybe all of his films aren't my favorite, but you take a look at his top 10 films, I'll put them against any director. He is amazing.
Amazing. Is there any other, because there's so many legends, is there any other director that anyone wants to talk about, a legend, before we move on?
I'd like to bring up George Lucas really quickly. I'm not a huge fan of Star Wars. I'm sorry. Please hold your tomatoes. But I'm not a huge fan of the Star Wars films. But you can't deny the impact that they've had, and not only on filmmaking. There's a lot of stories of people that have turned to science and have become more interested in technology and more sci-fi because of his Star Wars movies. You can say that he made space more accessible to a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have been interested in it. And I think that I just wanted to mention him real quick.
Can I jump in as well? Because what he's done with the pushing forward of digital film as well, like I'm a traditionalist. I prefer the aesthetic of filming on film. But what he was able to do with digital technologies and kind of contribute to the proliferation of the use of digital cameras has given many budding directors a chance to create film. So he's a legend on 2 counts. First of all, from what he did technically, and also from what he did with Star Wars, I think. Yeah.
All right, cool. Now?
Yeah.
As far as Lucas goes and telling, we think of space travel as this futuristic kind of thing, but then he set Star Wars in the past. And then I remember overhearing him talk about, about his films and about that, to even though it was these strange places, to keep a measure of familiarity with it. And I think that's some weird way why it all sort of worked.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point. George Lucas, definitely a legend. Kurosawa, definitely a legend. Ridley Scott, definitely a legend. And Adrian, who was yours again?
Rob Reiner.
Yes, Reiner.
Definitely a legend.
Definitely. All right. So if we were to make the Film Exiles Mount Rushmore, I think those are the heads we'll carve up there. All right. So moving on, we've talked about really popular big directors. Why don't we give a little bit of shine to the little guy? So now in this section, I want you guys to pick an up-and-coming director who is a director that you feel we should keep an eye on, want to watch, a horse that you're going to bet all your money on to come out on top in the future. And we'll start with Adrian, because we're gentlemen. Ladies first.
Okay, well, I have two directors I'd like to mention really quick. One is Dom Karakowski, who directed the Tolkien film. I thought that he beautifully captured and dignified the quiet moments in the internal life of the characters. So I'd be happy to watch that again anytime. And then also Vincent D'Onofrio, I'm saying it wrong, D'Onofrio, who has been an actor and teaches acting. But then with The Kid, I thought that he really showcased the performances by the actors and really lets them show what they can do. So I'd love to see that again. So Dom Karakowski and Vincent D'Onofrio.
Nice. And we have a review, a little discussion of Tolkien. So if you're interested in, a little bit of talk about that, and you want to know if you want to watch a movie, watch our review, and I hope, that entices you a little bit more. So Manu, give us a director to watch for in the future.
Well, since Adrian picked two, I'm going to pick two too, because I'm petty. The first one is David Robert Mitchell. He's most known for It Follows. It was a horror movie that came back out in 2014. I think that's a spectacular movie, but I got to know him last year, I guess, according to Chris. Because he came out with Under the Silver Lake that starred Andrew Garfield, and it's a movie that I really, really love. And what I like about him is that there is a definite, even though he's only done two movies, there's a definite style to him. You can tell that it's him behind the camera. He has a very specific style to how he shoots. He's weird. He's weird. Under the Silver Lake is definitely a weird ass movie, but but there's so many things in that movie that I adore, and I really excited to see what he's gonna do next, because I think that whatever it is going to be really quirky. It's going to be very different. It's going to be very weird, and I think that that's good sometimes. And my second pick is Ryan Coogler. I think Creed is probably one of my favorite films that's come out in the last 5 or 6 years. I think that he shoots so well. I love the way that his films look, whether it was his indie stuff or even Creed that's a little bit bigger. And I think that he has such a great style and such a great energy that he brings to his movies. And like Lupe just said earlier, we're a very positive pod, so saying negative things is not something that we tend to do a lot. But I love Michael B. Jordan, but he's not the greatest actor out there. But I think that Coogler is able to get to use him better than anybody else has been to this point. And you can tell that there's a difference between when he's working with Coogler than when he's working with somebody else. And I think that shows that he is able to get great things out of his actors. And even Stallone, he got an Oscar nominating performance out of Stallone in Creed as well. So I'm really excited to see what he does next. Even Black Panther, which I'm not as high on as many people. I think that he is able to do something that a lot of MCU directors have not been able to do, which is bring a lot of his own style to the film. He brought a lot of his own people that worked on his other projects with him. His costume designer, I forgot his name. Who does the score again?
Goranson.
He brought Goranson. Him and Goranson have been together since they were in college. He was able to bring him along, and Goranson has given us one of the best scores that we've gotten in years. And again, that is in large part thanks to Coogler and just his handling of the material and being able to be brave enough and just to do what he does. And I'm really excited to see whatever he does next.
All right, those are very good picks. So next up, Chris, can you give us a up and coming director to look out for?
Well, my up and coming director is a very well known name, but not in directing. I'm going to pick Casey Affleck. What he's only had 2 feature-length films, one in 2010, I'm Still Here, and you would think that, okay, if he's been doing it since 2010, he's not, how can he be up and coming? But he hasn't done anything since then, up until 2019's A Light of My Life, which is a story about a father and a daughter in a kind of apocalyptic future where there's a plague and there's no women, and he has to kind of look after his daughter, and it's his kind of responsibility to ensure that she's safe and survives. Me and Lupe actually did a pod on that film, and it is truly stunning. His cinematography was subtle but very powerful. His writing, and everyone will be aware of the Affleck family's capability in writing and acting. He acted in his own film. I think I would like to see what he can do purely behind the camera without the responsibilities of being on screen. And he actually has a film coming up. Well, it's been announced. It's called Far Bright Star, which is set in 1916. It's about an aging cavalryman who leads a team of men to hunt down a Mexican revolutionary by the name of Pancho Villa. And so after an ambush in which most of the men are killed, the cavalrymen must struggle to survive in the desert. Now, that's just a small synopsis of a film that's coming out in the future. But what kind of interests me is Affleck, who filmed this previous film, A Light of My Life, has managed, so he's had one film recently, he's managed to cast Joaquin Phoenix as the star of his film. So, and we all know that Joaquin Phoenix doesn't pick any old garbage. So there's something there. Joaquin sees something in Casey. I see it as well. And I'm putting my money on him as following in the footsteps of his brother, as being a stunning director to look at to the future.
Okay. All right. That's an interesting, good pick. Now, you guys, you had, your picks of directors. You call them up and coming, but they've all made Hollywood movies.
Come on,
in my eyes,
one indie movie.
In my eyes, they're already successes. They're already up there. So I'm gonna pick a real dark horse. I'm gonna go out on a limb. All right, this is a big gamble.
This is the limb of a giant.
Exactly. No, I'm gonna pick someone who has never directed a feature film. Okay, and my pick is Lisa Joy Nolan. And Lisa Joy Nolan is the wife and life partner of Jonathan Nolan, who is Christopher Nolan's brother. And she is one of the showrunners and writers of the Westworld TV show that's on HBO. If you don't know about Westworld, it's this very intense, dramatic, complex, sophisticated sci-fi Western. It follows in, the heritage and lineage of the intelligent blockbusters that Christopher Nolan has done. Stuff like Inception, stuff like Memento, which is smaller, but stuff like, Prestige. It has that same sort of complexity, that sort of intelligence. You're watching something that has, that excitement and largeness of a blockbuster, but then has the complexity and sort of nuance of a small indie art house, like sci-fi film. And she wrote a script over, very many years. I think she said it took her half a decade to write the script, and she's been perfecting it ever since. But it won an award to get on Hollywood's blacklist. And this is a list of a few of the best scripts that, are in Hollywood in a particular year, and the script got bought by Warner Brothers, and she's been picked as the director. She's pitched the film. She's done everything. She has Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Ferguson on deck as her leads. And I'm very excited. It's a future, sort of sci-fi film set in Miami about memories and memory extraction and that sort of thing. So I've heard her speak about the episode of Westworld that she shot, and she's a super intelligent, highly capable woman, and I can't wait to see what she does. I'm telling you guys, like, you heard it here first. Lisa Joy. Like, when you see her movies,
I forgot the last bit.
Lisa Joy Nolan.
Oh, Nolan.
Talent is not transmitted by blood, or in this case, by
marriage.
She just, like, don't take away her credit just because she's married to she in her own. As a matter of fact, I think she's actually like smarter than Jonathan Nolan. Like, that's my opinion from hearing them speak together and seeing how much reverence he has for her. I think she's actually even more of a capable filmmaker than Jonathan Nolan, who was like one of the best in the world. So, I've gone on too long already about Liz Joy, but in the future, when she's doing big things, we're going to be like, Lupe called it. All right, give me the credit, okay? When she gets her Oscar, they should give it to me first.
you should
exactly.
I don't think it works like that.
So that is my list. So let's do a quick recap of our legendary, iconic filmmaker that we picked and our up and comer. So for me, I picked Guy Ritchie. I picked M. Night Shyamalan. I picked Catherine Bigelow as my 3 favorite directors. For my legendary filmmaker, I picked Sergio Leone. And then for my up-and-comer, I picked Lisa Joy Nolan. Chris, can you tell us what you picked?
Yep, so a little recap. My favorite director of all time was my first pick, Christopher Nolan. My other 2 were Clint Eastwood and Oliver Stone, 3 of my favorite directors of all time. And my legend was Ridley Scott. Big respect, Ridley. And my up-and-comer is Casey Affleck.
All right. Adrian, could you give us a recap of the team of directors that you picked?
Sure. I mentioned the Zack Snyder, the Kenneth Branagh, and Peter Weir. And then as my legendary pick, I brought up Rob Reiner. And then my up-and-coming directors to watch, I mentioned Dom Karakowski and Vincent D'Onofrio.
Nice. And Manu, could you give us a recap of your selections?
I had David Fincher, Rick Famuyiwa, Denis Villeneuve as my 3 directors. Legendary, I had Kurosawa. And upcoming, I had David Robert Mitchell and Ryan Coogler. And I'm still not over the fact that Chris chose the guy who directed I'm Still Here as his upcoming guy. Have you seen I'm Still Here, Chris? Like, for real, have you seen that? It almost ruined Joaquin Phoenix's career. You do know that, right?
Hey, you watch what he did with Light of My Life, and then he is an up and coming director.
Do you know what?
You guys pick directors who have already arrived. At least I picked the director who has only done a TV episode. It might have been the best TV episode.
How many people do you think
he hasn't even done a feature?
How many people do you think saw that TV episode versus how many people saw Light of My Life?
That's a good quote. That's actually he's got you there. He's got you there.
It's not the same thing. Let's move on. We're running out of time. Let's move on. All right. So I mean, do you guys like the directors you picked? Do you have anything to say about your team in general? Anybody want to chime in?
it
Oh,
was
we,
just,
we also mentioned Lucas and Cameron were floating around in there too.
Yeah.
I'm
have to
kind
say-
of glad that we did mention Cameron a bit more. I think his role in the development of cinema needs to be respected, and that's why I give him a shout out there. As far as my overall list is, I'm delighted. The only person that took a name off me is Truth, who picked Zack Snyder. Everyone else, I got my first choice.
Well, I think for me it was just a really hard exercise because there's just so many great directors, and I think that we've honestly, like, I think this is good because it like reminds you just how lucky we are to have so many great artists working and giving us these great films and these just so many great things to talk about and to discuss and to analyze. I'm unfortunately I couldn't bring up Ron Howard, which was another guy that I absolutely adore, and that I think that he doesn't get talked about enough. I think we brought up Scorsese really quickly, and there's just so many great people out there that are just doing such great work. And Christopher McQuarrie is another one that I think is going to do some great things in the future as well. And I think that like this exercise was really difficult to like just pick just three.
Yeah, and also for our upcomers, we had the pleasure of having David Raymond on our podcast.
I really enjoyed the interview, and if you guys haven't heard the interview that was hosted by Manu and Mike, you should really listen to it. Very interesting guy, very bright guy, very driven, and I really can't wait to see how his career unfolds.
Yeah, Manu, how was that experience?
Honestly, it was unreal. It's one of those. I think it's one of the things that we've done on this platform that I'm the most proud of. Him coming on and just being able to talk about making a movie. Like this man made a movie, and we got to talk to him about his experience making a movie with Henry Cavill and Sir
He was literally
Kingsley.
making it. Hanging out of a car in the snow,
right? Hanging out with Sir Kingsley. It's just it's just I mean, like, a lot of the actors that are in Stanley Tucci, a lot of those actors, like, I've been watching them for years, and this guy got to work with them, and he got to talk to me about working with them, and I got to share that with you guys and with the rest of our listeners. I mean, like, that was something that really, it was honestly, the right word to use was, it was really inspiring to hear about his journey and how he got to where he got to, and it's kind of pushed me in a way that I want to do more. Like, I want to be able to go out there and do that too.
Yeah, I really loved the interview and look forward to seeing his career
unfold. Yeah. In terms of my list, I'm very happy with my picks. Interestingly, each of you stole one from me because I went last.
Sorry.
Snyder, Nolan, and Fincher. But you know what? But I'm very happy with the directors that I picked. As I said, there's so many great directors. Mm-hmm. Even if people had listed 10 directors, I would still have been happy to pick other directors. We have to give each of them their just due. They make different films. They have different voices. It's very difficult to rank them and say this guy is better than this guy because they're all beautiful, unique snowflakes. And I say that with all sincerity. In terms of upcoming directors, I only picked one, but someone that we didn't talk about that I think people should watch out for is Sam Ismail, who has only done TV stuff.
Yes.
He's done Mr. Robot, which a lot of people know, and he's also done Homecoming. We have a podcast on Homecoming, and Homecoming is probably it ranks as one of the best things ever made on television.
Yeah, definitely keep an eye out.
Keep an eye out for him. I can't wait to
add that he's made probably one of the most bizarre and just out there romantic comedies that I've ever seen. It's called Comet, and it stars Justin Long and I can't remember her name. The lead girl from Shameless, the U.S. version. I can't remember her name right now, but it's such a bizarre romantic comedy. He just can't do anything like anybody else, like it has to be.
He's unusual and unique and just him.
Yeah,
he's definitely an auteur.
Yeah,
definitely an auteur kind of filmmaker.
You're following this relationship, but it's in a non-linear way. and it's just incredible. He also writes that he wrote the movie as well, and like just for an exercise about what it's like to be in his mind, I definitely think that is worth checking out.
All right, cool. So there you have it, guys. That was awesome. I really had a lot of fun with that. Let's get some goodbyes. This is the bittersweet part of the podcast. So Adrian, where can we find you on the interwebs, and where can we talk to you?
Well, because I mentioned the Truman Show, I'm going to have to say, in case I don't see you, you can find me on Twitter at Grace Love Faith.
Nice. Manu, where can we find you?
You can find me at ManUnited0710.
Very cool. And Chris, where can we find your toxicity?
You can find me on Twitter and on Vero, and talk to me about your favorite directors on @Vinaldo7.
All right. And I am yours truly. You can find me on Twitter at LiveLoveLupe, and you can find me on Vero at LiveLoveLupe, because a double scoop of chocolate is good for you. And I'm really glad that we did this episode, because at the heart of everything that we talk about is the filmmaker, is the director. And we're glad that we're able to give them a lot of shine. So goodbye, guys. Talk to you soon in another episode of the Film Exiles podcast.